approval on the minutes? Okay, they're saying without objection. Council, if you will take a look at your, agenda for this evening. Again, ordinances on the final reading. Any questions or comments, feel free to hit the light. And, IT, if you could change this board to city council board. Okay. Is this Councilman Ledford?
Oh, no, ma'am.
It's clear.
All right, you take a look at your ordinances, thank you so much. Your ordinances under first reading. We have items on the council no, I'm sorry, no ordinances on the first reading, resolutions. Take a look at those. Questions, comments, please hit your lights. All right. Next week's proposed agenda. Any questions or comments regarding that, if you would take a look at that. All right. Purchasing questions or comments? All right, any comments or questions? I don't see any lights. If you would take a look at future considerations. All right, Councilman Hester?
Let me find it. There, on the 18th, there is, let's see. Some work that's gonna be done on Shalford Road. I guess that's a Ben question, is that not? Yeah, I can't find it. You want me?
All right.
Yeah, I see it.
It's on the.
Okay, I see it. Under 6A, under July 18th.
On our two-week agenda, item 6A.
Ben, can you bring me a better understanding of what's going on there?
Yes, sir. So which case are we asking about?
2023-0061, Dillard Partnership,
So that's in next week's agenda?
next week's agenda, correct. It's on the ordinance 6, first reading, Public Works.
I'm having a difficult time understanding which one you're asking about. Oh. Yes, sir. So this is a little stub of right-of-way. Just goes in, I think, about 150 feet in off Shallowford, back into the property. And we're recommending approval, along with Planning Commission's approval, to abandon that piece of right-of-way.
Okay, thank you.
You bet.
All right, is that it, Councilman Hester?
I am, thank you.
All right, under, I believe, future considerations. Any comments or questions? We don't have any departmental reports, but we do have some other business regarding form-based code. Phil, if you could update us on that.
Yes, ma'am. You have an appeal on form-based code that has at least been requested from the form-based code committee. Pursuant to the provisions of the city code, that would come to this body, and then it could potentially go to court afterwards on here. It requires a public hearing by this body and a review of evidence that is based upon a report that you will receive from the Land Development Office on what the form-based code committee did. And so, I guess the timing of that event is what we need to at least schedule here for that public hearing. And I was requesting, if possible, if we could do that on August the 1st, if available, and we'll get everything ready.
That would be fine, to schedule it for August the 1st.
All righty, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, other than that, we have, committees today. We have, Parks and Public Works, as well as Planning and Zoning Committee. So any other questions of the business?
I do.
All right.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Something that I wanted to bring to our attention is the work that the Park Committee is doing. Councilman Henderson, I know that you're aware of that issue, and I wonder, when might we expect a Public Safety Committee to talk about the implications of the new state legislation on our Park Committee? Or could you just put that on your radar, please, and get something on the calendar?
We probably need to speak with the attorney a little bit more about it. Administration is also looking into, what Knoxville is doing. Apparently they have, seem to be able to manage what they're doing, so as soon as we get a few more pieces put together, we can bring it to the body.
Okay, thank you very much.
All right, is that it, Madam Vice Chair?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, thank you, Councilman Henderson. Any other business? All right, so with that, we'll turn it over to Councilman Hester for Parks and Public Works, followed by Planning and Zoning by Councilman Ledford.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Welcome back and welcome to Parks and Public Works Committee. We accept the minutes. Thank you. Madam Clerk, can you read Resolution F, G, and H, please?
Item F, a resolution authorizing the appointment of Kenneth Martin Jr. as a special police officer unarmed for the City of Chattanooga Department of Public Works Land Development Office to do special duty as prescribed herein in the position of Code Enforcement Inspector 1, subject to certain conditions. Item G, a resolution authorizing the appointment of Sean Mayfield as a special police officer unarmed for the City of Chattanooga Department of Public Works Land Development Office to do special duty as prescribed herein in the position of Code Enforcement Inspector 1, subject to certain conditions. Item H, a resolution authorizing the administrator for the Department of Public Works to enter into an agreement with Tally Construction Company relative to contract number T-23-004-201 for construction services associated with fiscal year 2024 to 2025 citywide resurfacing in the amount of $20,168,626.41, with a contingency amount of $2,016,862.64, for a total amount of $22,185,489.05, subject to appropriation of funds.
Thank you. Ordinance on first reading, Transportation A, please.
An ordinance closing and abandoning an unopened right-of-way in the 4700 block of Shallowford Road as detailed on the attached maps, subject to certain conditions.
Thank you again, Ben. 7B, please.
A resolution authorizing the appointment of Blake Easterly as a special police officer unarmed for the City of Chattanooga Department of Public Works Land Development Office to do special duty as prescribed herein in the position of engineering coordinator, subject to certain conditions.
E, please.
A resolution authorizing the administrator for the Department of Public Works to approve change order number 1 for contract number S-20-012-101 with Wolpert, Inc. to continue professional services for the City of Chattanooga / Hamilton County Water Quality Monitoring Project for the next 3 years, to increase funding in the amount of $300,000 for a total project cost for the City of Chattanooga not to exceed $585,000.
Wastewater F, and G, please.
Item F, a resolution authorizing the administrator for the Department of Wastewater to execute a Fifth Amendment to the Environmental and Economic Infrastructure Improvements Plan, E2I2, an interlocal agreement for cost sharing between the City of Chattanooga, Tennessee, and the Hamilton County Water and Wastewater Treatment Authority
Do we need to get
as part of the City of Chattanooga's consent decree and said amendment governing the transfer of ownership of the parcel at, what is that? The transfer of ownership of the parcel at 6,000 Corneliuson Road from Hamilton County Water and Wastewater Treatment Authority to the city of Chattanooga. Item G, a resolution rescinding resolution number 31559 and authorizing the mayor or his designee to enter into a lease with the Industrial Development Board of the City of Chattanooga in substantially the form attached for the design and construction of the city's proposed wet weather equalization stations to be located at 220 Corneliuson Road, identified as a portion of tax map number 157M-A-009.03 and 7148 Lee Highway, identified as tax map numbers 139P-C-008.01 and 138M-C-002.1, for a term of 6 years for an annual amount of $1, subject to final closing, and authorizing the lease of the wet weather station at 6,000 Corneliuson Road, identified as tax map number 169D-A-001.02 upon its conveyance to the city of Chattanooga.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. I see no hands. And at this time, we'll have Planning and Zoning Committee by Chairman Ledford. Thank you.
All right, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to our Planning and Zoning Committee meetings for July 11th. If I can get a motion for the minutes, please. Motions will stand without objection. Today we have 17 items, 2 items that are withdrawn by request, 5 opposition, 1 special exceptions permit. Ms. Rennick, good afternoon. Council, if you don't mind, and I want to thank Vice Chairwoman Hill for setting up our format when she was in this position. I think it's worked very efficiently. We're going to cover the items that had opposition first. And if there's any cases that council needs to hear or wants to hear, we will cover those following up. Karen, starting off, if you look in your packet, case 0262, 0263, Thornhill Management in District 6, both have a request for withdrawal.
That's correct. And I'm going to, I have a few kind of housekeeping items to start with. But yes, wanted to note that we had an email dated July 5th requesting that these cases be withdrawn, and the applicant was told that that we would convey that to council, and then depending on council action.
Karen, I do have one quick question, as I'm sure Dr. Burrs has. So we have in our rules the window of time from Planning Commission. This did come through, obviously, with approval. But are we in that window? Because this has been noticed, we still need to take action.
My understanding is, since it's been put on council's agenda, that council action would be needed.
And we do have an item, I know, in District 4 that did fall in that window.
That's correct.
That does not. I know you'll cover that.
Yes, that's correct. So the applicant's aware that this will need council action.
Very good. Okay.
And then if you can just kind of bear with me for some housekeeping, based on the comment about when a case was withdrawn, we had case 2023-0092, was a rezoning on Jenkins Road that was, I believe, recommended for both denial by staff and planning commission. That case was withdrawn prior to getting on council's agenda, but just for the record and anyone who might be tracking that, just to be aware that that case was withdrawn.
And Karen, this is the perfect example of the utilization of that process that we put into our rules for the applicant to have the opportunity to withdraw something that came through, obviously, per their choice. But I think that's a wonderful example of how that tool is useful.
And this also helps us, because the minutes then can document the activity, and that helps us close out the case.
Yeah. Thank you.
So then again, as mentioned, some housekeeping. We had a case previously tabled. This is just a kind of a cut and paste from council minutes. In March 8th, 2022, case 2021-0213, PBD Development, Gun Barrel Partners, Chattanooga Hotel Properties, Napier Associates had a zoning case to lift conditions, it's a case to amend conditions. There had been quite a bit of discussion with the city. I think we're at the point with the applicant and partners working together with CDOT that we are ready to bring this case off the table, if that's the appropriate term, for action by council. And communicated with Phil Noblet on this. My understanding was if we brought this up at committee, there could be action to put that back on council agenda. And if appropriate, staff would ask that we be 4 weeks out. That would allow it to be put on the agenda, but we could talk about it at the Planning and Zoning Committee on August 1st, with action being August 8th, so we can get through any logistics. And if there's any questions for CDOT or RPA, we could do them at that August 1st meeting.
So I have a technical question for Phil, but I want to thank you, RPA. Ben, thank you. We've been working on this for quite some time. Things have changed and parameters have changed. Expectations have changed, the way the ordinance was originally written. And through staff's guidance and Ben's assistance tremendously, we've found good ground here, I think, that makes sense for everybody. So my technical question for Phil, this was tabled by myself. It was seconded by Councilman Smith. Do I need to bring that off of the table today?
You can move and have to have a second at that point.
Okay, but I'm in the chair position, so do I need someone else to bring that out?
It would need to be someone that also voted, I guess, in favor of the tabling motion, as long as they did that.
Okay, I'm looking at him.
Want it right now? Are we in a position?
Can we do that right now?
Good.
Yeah, move to remove from table.
Okay, and there's a second. All right. So we got what we need, Karen. Thank you. Thank you, Councilman Smith. And then this will be placed on for our next Planning and Zoning Committee meeting, so we'll review it in full at that time, and I appreciate your help. And Ben, again, I can't thank you enough for working through this.
And we do have an alternate version that has the condition that's been worked out as instead of what was addressed in 22.
We can go ahead and send that, correct?
Pardon?
Can we go ahead and send that
Yes.
out so everyone's aware?
Yes, Maria already drafted that
The more
for us.
time, the better.
Yeah, great.
Okay, very good.
Okay. The two that were just mentioned, the Lee Highway zoning cases. And then this also hopefully went to the council members that had cases in the district. Alan Jones with Stone Creek Consulting has 4 cases on tonight's agenda. He is out of town and asked that they be deferred 1 week to July 18th. I believe, put an asterisk by case 85, I believe there's a potential interest by Chairwoman Dotley to move that to 3 weeks. I just wanted to flag that. But the applicant had conveyed to us that he had spoken with everyone that had a case in the district and had already spoken to folks, so.
If you'll hang on 1 second. Councilman Hester, I see your light. Do you need to comment? Oh, I'm sorry, Madam. He slid one over. Madam Chair, please.
Yes, so I did want to confirm that I will be asking for a 3-week deferral on that case number 2023-0085 to give time for a community meeting for that one. So I'll be asking for that one tonight.
Very good. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you.
Dr. Burrs, I see your light.
Yeah, it's been on since we first started with Thornhill. I did get the appropriate letter from Thornhill that he wants to withdraw both the cases. My question is, and I guess this is a Phil question.
Yes, ma'am.
Phil, we have to approve a withdrawal?
If it's already on your agenda, yes, it's under your control at that time, once it's on your agenda.
So what you're saying, and this is just a question I have, suppose we don't approve the withdrawal, then the guy is stuck with it? Is there not a better way to handle it? That's all I'm asking.
He would be stuck with the vote or the, what
So
this body does up there.
is it more to deny or withdraw? I'm just asking.
to withdraw, at least allows him to come up with a better plan to bring back to you.
Okay,
That's-
all right.
That's the advantage.
Yeah, that helps. So then I will be moving tonight to withdraw on both those cases.
Very good.
And I do have the appropriate letter that actually it should have come to me, which it did. Yeah,
Very good.
okay.
All right. Thank you, Dr. Burris.
Okay, then I'll start going through. We have 5 cases. I'm going to start with H, which is a rezoning in Alton Park. So give me a second to get there.
Case 0084.
Yes. Okay. This is a request to rezone 307 West 42nd Street in Alton Park from M1 Manufacturing Zone to RTZ Residential Townhouse Zero Lot Line Zone to develop 2 single-unit detached dwellings. And I think I'm going to skip to the end to show you what the desire is. There's one lot that has frontage on 41st and 42nd Street. The applicant would like to kind of recreate maybe the original lot pattern and put 2 single-family homes in. This did have opposition though, so I'll speak to it briefly. The site zoned M1 manufacturing shown in purple, as is much of the surrounding property. 4105 and 4107 Highland Avenue are the yellow R1 properties at the corner of West 42nd and Highland. Those were rezoned in 2006. And then the R3 property just to the northeast of the site was rezoned from M1 to R3 in 2016. So there is some precedent in the area from rezoning from manufacturing to residential. The site's located in the Alton Park Master Plan, which recommends recreation as a land use for the site. I don't know if that was a use 23 years ago at this location, but the plan provides following goals, which include increase the number of quality, diverse, and affordable homes in Alton Park through rehab, infill, and new construction, and encourage new single-family ownership. And so, just as a reminder, in the M1 zone, you cannot cannot build housing, and the requested RTZ zone would allow for a slightly denser urban infill than other residential zones, but would allow the development of the proposed those 2 single-unit residences. So staff found the request is compatible with the goals of the plan surrounding land uses and development form and recommended approval. There was opposition present at Planning Commission. A major stakeholder mentioned they were not contacted about the project, had quite a few questions about impact, and the stakeholder, if you'll notice, labeled Union Grove Baptist Church parking lot. Union Grove's kind of catty corner across Highland Park Avenue. That was the person kind of with questions and wanting to understand impact. It's a little bit off the slide, but it's just across Highland Avenue from kind of where their parking lot is. Planning Commission found their request is compatible with the plan, development form, and adjacent land uses and recommends approval.
Madam Chair, any questions or comments? No, not at all. All right. Thank you,
Okay.
Karen.
The next case is 85, and it's a request to rezone a half an acre in the 2800 block of Dodds Avenue from M1 Manufacturing to UGC Urban General Commercial Zone to build 12 townhouse units. 8 of them are proposed to be live-work units, and we'll talk about that a little bit later, related to zoning. The property is at the intersection of East 29th Street and Dodds Avenue, and because opposition spoke to the concerns about traffic at the intersection, I'll just note East 29th Street goes up the ridge and intersects with the roundabout with West Side Drive, just west of the tunnels. So I think that just understanding that kind of is coming down from the tunnels, coming off the ridge might kind of help understand the opposition's comments a little bit. The development form consists of urban single-unit residential and 2-unit lots to the east and northeast, and larger manufacturing industrial uses along Dodds. There are some office and commercial uses south of the site on Dodds across 29th Street. The development form's reflected in that zoning, so R1 residential is shown in yellow, and then kind of that block of manufacturing along Dodds Avenue. Site's located in the Rossville Boulevard Community Plan, which recommends low-density residential for the site with some mix of townhomes, patio homes, and two-family dwellings. Staff noted that the proposed UGC zone would introduce potential nuisance uses and higher density residential to the area, but that a residential zone would achieve the goals of the Rossville Boulevard Community Plan without introducing kind of all the other uses that come with the UGC zone. We did follow up on the live-work situation. The applicant has stated that the live-work units would function similar to home occupations rather than kind of a traditional office commercial retail use, and staff felt that a residential zoning district would allow for home occupations and home office uses. The R3 zone, staff is recommending the R3 zone instead of the UGC, would allow for moderate density development without posing conditions related to use and height to be more compatible with the plan recommendations and the residential uses in the area. In the R3 zone, the applicant is able to construct 8 townhomes, home occupation structures. So staff had recommended to deny the applicant's request of UGC and approve the R3 residential zone. There was opposition, President has mentioned, about traffic in that high-traffic intersection at 29th and Dodds. Planning Commission found that with conditions, the applicant request meets the plan recommendation form and adjacent land uses and is subject to the following conditions. So Planning Commission is recommending UGC, subject to the following conditions: residential uses only and maximum building height of 3 stories.
Any questions, Madam Chair?
No, this is the one we will, this particular one will be deferred 3 weeks, given time for a community meeting.
Thank you, ma'am.
Okay.
Okay. Next case with opposition was case 93, which is J on the agenda. It's a request to rezone 45 acres in Alton Park from M1 manufacturing to C3 Central Business District zone with conditions to develop single-family, multifamily, and mixed-use development. And the applicant provided a list of self-imposed conditions as part of the request. They're quite robust, so I didn't put them all on this slide, but we will get to them. This is the former Acme brick site, shown highlighted in red. And the 55-acre property that wraps around the site to the west and south is zone M1 manufacturing. But it has a deed restriction that reserves the property for conservation. So due to that deed restriction and the fact that it's under the same ownership as the rezoning site, staff is viewing that acreage as being used for open space. Just showing the map, a lot of times we do have concerns when it might be adjacent to a manufacturing site and we're introducing residential. So just wanted to highlight that staff, with the deed restrictions and the same ownership, was reviewing that as considering that more of an open space, even though it's zoned manufacturing. There's been several zoning cases in the area. On Central in 2017, there was a rezoning for 4821 and 4905 Central Avenue from M1 to R3. That was approved with conditions by council, and then in 2020, the applicant came back to amend a couple of the conditions from the 2017 rezoning. And then earlier this year, the 2023, just there at West 51st and Central, we had a zoning request to rezone from R2 residential zone to urban general commercial zone, and that case was withdrawn. Surrounding development form in the area is a mix of small, single-family residential lots with kind of 1 to 2 story dwellings, some large industrial tracts with those kind of associated buildings, parking and activity, and that new multifamily development under construction on Central Avenue, and that's at about 17 dwelling units per acre. The site has slopes that range. This is a slope map, and I try to show these when some of the comments or opposition or plan mention slope. The site has slopes that range from 26 to 63% grade on the site, and then we've been trying to be clear in our staff reports that if site is developed, the applicant will be required to comply with the vegetative planning requirements when steep slopes of 30% or more are disturbed during construction. So I'm mentioning this is because the slopes are mentioned in the adopted plan and as a condition. So staff is using the application narrative, the list of requested conditions, and the site plan in the totality to review the requested zoning for this new mixed-use community. This is a site plan that was provided, shows the area proposed for single-family attached and detached residences, 5-story multi-unit residential, that's in the light green along Central, and 4-story multifamily, which are shown in pink. So as mentioned, there's kind of the three things we looked at. That's the site plan. Application narrative is part of the application materials. This is something we started doing about a year ago to get a little bit more detail about the project. I'm going to kind of read some of the points that are more specific to the zoning. It's a multi-year, multi-phase project. It's going to be high-density, single-family detached, single-family attached, multi-unit residential buildings and neighborhood commercial buildings, a diverse range of unit sizes, diverse parking solutions, including surface, street, and garage, shared community spaces and parks, interconnected trail network, priority and focus on pedestrian experience, limited impact grading plans utilizing existing topography, preserving a woodland buffer along the western edge of the property, and leveraging, and then R, being the applicant, our interest in the Hawkins Ridge conserved land, 50-plus acres immediately adjacent to this parcel, into a publicly accessible amenity. I know you can't read this, so I just want to read that the applicant ended that the C3 zone with conditions is the only option that aligns with the development vision and has been effectively used in other large-scale urban redevelopment projects, Jefferson Heights, Milltown, Judd Road, various locations. So if you'll bear with me, I'm going to touch on a couple items related to this. It's a little bit more robust, but just staff noted, and you've heard this before in a couple other zoning cases, there's been a market change. It's occurred where industrial areas are being converted to residential and mixed-use developments. This is evident in the recent rezonings of industrial zone land and uses to residential and mixed zones, and these rezoning requests demonstrate the need for additional housing in our community and the value of mixed-use development on vacant former industrial sites. Property is currently zoned M1 manufacturing with no conditions. It can introduce new uses over time that could have nuisance and safety concerns on the adjacent properties and due to the size of the site, kind of the community in general. Site's located in the Alton Park Master Plan, which recommends heavy industrial as the land use designation for this site, but the plan also has specific goals related to housing in the area, such as initiate infill program to construct housing and stabilize the community, encourage new single-family home ownership, encourage environmentally sensitive development concepts, and knit residential areas back together with the community. So the plan recommends that heavy industrial mix. So staff acknowledges the applicant's request to introduce mixed-use residential uses on the property, and just kind of the mixed-use component can be a benefit to the community, but the proposed mixed-use development could have even more activity, however, than the former brick company. The plan, again, just pointing to the specific goals about housing. So the introduction of residential uses into an area zoned and used for manufacturing can cause land use triggers for certain uses. So we have mentioned before that in converting manufacturing property to residential, we like to look at the other manufacturing uses to make sure it's not going to put them in a situation where they might have a use that's now prohibited. A windshield survey did not show any concerns by that. And the applicant started with the kind of the typical C3 conditions is what they submitted. Those conditions have been used, established over time as typical standards for quality urban development, and were traditionally applied to downtown and other developments primarily before the form-based code. These conditions help ensure an urban street edge along the city streets, require development standards, support walkable places, and screen parking and building equipment. So staff recommended approval with conditions, with just adding the R3 zone as a zone that would trigger transition standards. There's a neighborhood just to the northeast of the site, northwest of the site, that's zoned R3, but single-family homes. We want to trigger setback standards from that. And then recommending the condition, no mass grading or mass clearing above the 800 topo line. And the intention of that condition is to support the plan recommendations of developing an environmentally sensitive way. So, no, that was a lot, but this is a large project with quite a few aspects, and staff just wanted to make sure we gave it a thorough review. There was opposition present. And both support present at Planning Commission. Can you see the list there? Higher taxes, gentrification, concern about big box retailers kind of versus neighborhood serving, concern that this would not serve existing residents. And then there was a note that there was a need for change in the community and that this could support the change. Planning Commission found the request is compatible with the adopted plan, development form, and adjacent land uses in the area, and recommended approving the C3 with conditions. And the conditions that Planning Commission recommends are the same. The conditions the applicant initially recommended are kind of self-imposed. The additional conditions for a little bit more transition buffering and no grading above the topo line. And so those are moved forward, and I'm happy to speak to those, but I'm just going to kind of flip through to kind of, you can kind of see the kind of the elements that they all cover. And then you're seeing that transition standard, the R3 zone there, and the no mass grading. I apologize, that was a lot, but it's a pretty robust review.
Pretty big project. Madam Chair.
Yes. So thank you, Karen, for that presentation. This is a very big project for Alton Park. Very excited about it. We did have 3 community meetings, and so the community is on board with this project. They're very excited about it. I did have a few, I have 3 amendments to make to it for this evening. For front, side, and rear setbacks, for new multifamily buildings, 4 stories in height or greater, a 15-foot building setback for that one. And under minimum and maximum height for clarity, no minimum height limitation for attached or detached single-family homes, and a maximum height of 4 stories for single-family residential structures. And one more. And under item 8, no mass grading or mass clearing above the 820 topo line. And that's just so they can grade, they can build higher or grade higher, whatever the case is. But either way, the neighborhood is very excited. I am very excited about this. It's going to bring much needed density, home ownership, a lot of the things that the community has been asking for 20 plus years is now coming to fruition for them. And I'm very happy for their participation and their clarity and understanding that this isn't about gentrification. This is not about displacement, but it is about adding people back into their community, adding residents, adding home ownership. I believe last year, roughly 55% of the homes that were sold were from investors. So now, with this development, they're bringing in home ownership, and that is going to be, that's key and important for that area, for a diversity of housing stock, a diversity of incomes. And so I'm very excited to move on this tonight, if you can't tell. So just wanted to make those notes and those amendments, and I'll bring those up tonight as well.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Process question, Madam Chair, since you'll be in the center chair and you cannot make a motion from that
Right.
position, will you be changing, swapping out, or?
Absolutely, yes,
Okay,
I absolutely will.
We will look for that to happen.
Yes, sir.
Very good, thank you. Any other comments, Madam Chair?
Oh, no, that's it.
Very good, thanks. Okay, Karen,
78?
7-8?
And then these will go much quicker. Okay, this is on Elmendorf Street, a request to rezone 2404 Elmendorf from R1 to R3 with conditions to develop 8 single-unit residential detached dwellings. The proposed conditions, or the conditions proposed by the applicant, are only single-family detached homes shall be allowed, and a maximum of 8 units. So, as you know, the R3 zone allows that multi-unit project and products, and the applicant was saying that they were only doing single-family detached. The site was part of a zoning study, rezoning study in 2004 that rezoned the site from R2 residential to R1 residential zone. And the surrounding development form is single-unit residential dwellings, primarily single-family residential unit dwellings and some vacant property. The urban patterns found in the area, I'll skip that. The 10 dwelling unit acre density proposed for this is parking in the front is not suitable for an urban residential single-family neighborhood. The River to Ridge Plan recommends urban residential single-family, which is an overlay that is described as single-family detached and accessory dwelling units only. So as you know, the Area 3 plan really opens up a lot of opportunities for change and mix of housing. But there is an overlay in the plan that really reinforces single-family detached only, and this is one of those areas. The site's also in the natural resources overlay, and it just identifies areas that have sensitive, either steep slopes, floodplains, or wetlands. It's just to give some additional, encouraging additional consideration for protection. And this is a slope map that shows the topography of the site, which I think impacts a little bit the proposed development. This is moving up the ridge to North Chamberlain. The request to rezone is not compatible with Area 3, which again recommends just that single-family detached. The R3 zone introduces a higher intensity zoning, which is not identified for that use, and it's also not compatible with the surrounding development form. The site is comprised currently of 6 lots of record, which would allow for the potential development of a single-family detached dwelling and ADU on each lot. So the applicant originally wanted to do 8 units, and staff was just noting that there's already 6 lots of record there that would allow the potential development of a single-family detached dwelling and ADU on each lot. So this development's under current zoning would allow the existing neighborhood form. So staff was recommending to reinforce the existing neighborhood form that's by using the lots of record, which would still produce units. There was opposition present, notes about the quality of the street, bedrock, looks like the development looks like a mobile home park, steep slopes, protection of historic landmarks. I think that it is an R1, it is an R3 zone, but the product is intended to be single-family detached, and the applicant conveyed at Planning Commission they're trying to work with the topography. I mentioned the slopes on that site, but there was concern from the neighbors. So Planning Commission found the request is compatible, adjacent land uses and with adjacent land uses in development form, and recommended approval. But I did want to note that Planning Commission's recommendation to approve the R3 zone doesn't include the original conditions proposed by the applicant. So the applicant originally proposed only single-family detached homes shall be allowed and maximum of 8 units. So the ordinance rezoning to R3 doesn't include those conditions. Just a note there.
Councilwoman Coonrod, do you have any questions? This was a very interesting case last month. If you'll hit your light for me, I'll put you. Yes, ma'am.
Thank you, Chair. Yep, it's been interesting. We met with the community just on last week, but we're gonna move forward with it, but to add an amendment to include the original conditions.
And I, so I might have at the end switched between UGC and R3. So the staff recommendation was R3. Planning Commission's recommendation was UGC. And so subject, and I believe this, but the idea is to add the conditions to the UGC to make sure.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you, ma'am.
Yes, that was quite a robust discussion at Planning Commission.
Very interesting. All right, 8-3.
This is the last case, and this is a request to rezone from R1 and R3 residential zone to UGC also. The idea is to develop 10 townhomes. And at Planning Commission, the residents, every resident called this OB Street instead of Obey Street. And they all said that we call it OB Street. So I'm calling it OB Street unless someone knows differently, because we were not aware of that. The idea is to develop 10 townhomes and bring the existing multi-use structure into compliance. There's no recent rezoning history for the site, and there is no UGC zone property near the site. I'm going to go to the picture and then I'm going to back up. This is the development that's on Shallowford Road, because that way it keeps you kind of orient. And this is the back of the development. This is from OB Street, and then this is the site from OB Street, just to kind of help you orient. The site is surrounded by single-unit residences and vacant land along the ridge. It has sloping topography on Missionary Ridge with slopes that range from 26 to 63% grade. And staff noted that we don't have specific plan guidance for this area related to introducing higher density residential in this naturally sensitive area. We do not have an adopted plan specific to this area. So again, staff noting that those vegetative planning requirements with steep slopes of 30% or more would be, need to be addressed. And so I will kind of go you see on Shallowford Road, you have that kind of the existing multi-unit building. Fronts on Shallowford, the applicant would like to add the additional of the structures on OB Street. So kind of looking to help orient from this picture, it would be a little bit kind of to the west of the site if I'm, would kind of only have the picture that to orient from this picture. So there, as mentioned, there's no adopted community plan. The proposed UGC zone will introduce an urban form, density, and mix of uses. It's not supported by an area plan, and it's just similar to the surrounding development. So staff is recommending to deny the urban general commercial zone and approve R3 residential zone. So staff noted that approving the R3 residential zone for the entirety of the site will bring the existing multi-unit residential structure into zoning compliance. As you can tell from the zoning map, there's a little strip of brown R3 that runs through the site, and that a portion of the site, even where the multi-units are, is zoned R1. So staff was recommending R3 for the entirety of the site to bring the existing structure into compliance and allow limited additional residential development. Rezoning to R3 would allow 3 to 4 additional units to be developed on the site, and the staff recommendation was for the R3. There was no, there was opposition present at Planning Commission for both OB Street and then for residents that lived above or near the site. Traffic, concern about OB Street being very narrow, views blocked, density. Planning Commission found that the request with conditions is compatible with the development policy, development form and adjacent land uses of the area. And their Planning Commission recommended approving UGC subject to the following condition: maximum building height of 3 stories. And that was, I believe, an attempt to both address the density and the view issue.
Councilwoman Coonrod, any comments or questions on this case? You had your light. Thank you.
You hit my light. Thank you,
Yes, ma'am.
Chair. Ethan, I thank you for investing in District 9, and you took those condos and you got them back to life, because that area had been just an eyesore for decades. I've spoken with the residents of Missionary Ridge, and Ethan and I have been in communication as well, so we're going to defer it to August the 8th. To kind of give the community, educate them about, what UGC is and what all the things that we can, so we can have a workable solution to where the development can continue to happen in District 9.
Yes, ma'am. And on that note, it was noted yesterday at Planning Commission too that UGC is the go-to zone these days. Square pegs, round holes. So we're all getting very excited to have more tools to be able to address situations like this than just our go-to UGC. Can you talk, Karen, do I remember conversation on this case about widening OB Street? Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yes, and I actually have the note about that. Thank you. And there was a note in the staff report that the applicant would be required to reconstruct OB Street to city standard width from Shallowford Road to the end of their development. So just to orient to the, let's see, I'll pull this the other way. So the intersection of Shallowford and OB is to kind of to the right of this, to this picture. The applicant will be required to reconstruct it to the end of their development to accommodate increased traffic for the roadway. And just to note that currently OB Street cannot support increased volume.
Very good.
And that's a note, and a lot of times if something's going to come up during permitting, we just try to flag it for an applicant.
Very good. Councilwoman Coonrod, any further comments, questions?
Nope.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you much. Karen, that ends our cases with opposition this afternoon. I know we have a special exceptions permit. You want to run through that real quick? And then I do want to ask you to give us an update on something that you talked about, or Dan might have talked about yesterday, about the alcohol in UGC being under a residential use only. I think that was important because I believe that conversation originated from this dais.
Sure.
And we've made movement on that, so.
Okay, I'll start with the special exceptions permit. It is approving a new special exceptions permit for an existing liquor store. And council probably remembers, not too long ago, there was a special exception permit for this liquor store. I believe that was maybe December. My understanding has been there's been a change of applicant, change of ownership, which is triggering the need for the new special permit. But we did not update the staff report because it is just a change of ownership, is my understanding.
Okay. Councilwoman Coonrod, I see your light, you are active. Do you need to speak?
Yeah, I wanted to ask her on Q.
Okay, if you don't mind, give me 1 second. Let me go to Vice Chairwoman Hill. Did I hit, were you in queue?
I was, but
Put your hand up. All right, we're there.
I just wanted to make a note that in planning item A, I'd like to add some conditions to that. And they will be some of our pretty standard conditions. I've spoken with the applicant, or communicated with the applicant, and they understand the conditions and are aware of this. The conditions I'd like to add will be prohibition of using this for vehicular repair facilities, new and used dealerships, and repair facilities, adult-oriented establishments, automobile wrecker services, outdoor storage, mini warehouses, wholesale with accessory warehouses, and off-premise signs shall be prohibited. That will be our language we will be adding to that. That is case number 0096,
Okay.
item A in planning.
Okay, we'll be on the lookout for an amendment from the floor, and you'll probably have that in writing, I'm sure. Okay, very good. Okay, does that all count, Vice Chairman?
That's all, thank you.
Councilwoman Coonrod, did you need the microphone? I have Councilwoman Knoll in queue. Let me go to her real quick.
Okay, so mine's is just real quick, for planning, L, that there is opposition for 2023-0075.
75? Mm-hmm. Is that a case, ma'am, you would like to have
Defer.
reviewed?
Yes, no, I just actually need to defer it when we have time, but just to let you know that there is opposition.
There is opposition to that case, and we should expect a motion for
Yes.
deferral? Okay. Busy evening. Okay. I got Councilwoman Coonrod, thank you for your patience.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. You know, I've been practicing patience this past whole 30 days, but, for item, in planning 2023-0086, this area is right on the side of District 7, so we're gonna defer this, for 3 weeks to August the 1st, so we can meet with the community about this development.
All right. We may only have 2 items to go through tonight, but this case, all right. Right. Karen, you want to talk a little bit about resident use only in UGC and what we talked about the alcohol and obviously the 500-foot?
Okay, so I have on I was thinking we were talking about the short-term vacation rental, the item that came up at Planning Commission yesterday, but perhaps there's something else.
No.
This is another discussion.
If I may.
Sure,
I think
absolutely.
what I heard yesterday was that we determined, or staff has determined, that when you apply for or put a condition on UGC as a only, that it does not quantify or qualify the alcohol, and that basically you're covered. It excludes it. I should be more clear. It excludes that use, because we had talked about that, whether or not that was part of UGC. But when you move into that residential, I'll just use this word, cancels that.
Sure, so yes, we have, and it is related, the short-term, been mentioned at council about UGCs with residential only, and then how does that trigger short-term vacation rentals? And I think it's related. And so we have drafted because we had several cases for people wanting to lift the condition, and then, so we had lots of discussion.
Right.
And yesterday, Planning Commission recommended to move forward a amendment that would, if, in this example, if the case is residential use only, this came from all that discussion about UGC residential use only, that meant that short-term vacation rentals were considered commercial use for purpose of that zoning condition. So if someone has UGC residential use only, and wanted to lift the condition to allow short-term vacation rentals, it would trigger the waiting period. So it is trying to bring a little bit of clarity to what happens, because we know it came up here with all those UGCs with residential use only. So that'll be coming to you next month. There's also a little bit of housekeeping. We noticed after we had been using the short-term vacation rental ordinance that we had a couple items in the zoning ordinance that needed to be cleaned up. But yes, it clarifies for the purpose of residential use only conditions that that short-term vacation rentals are considered a commercial use.
Very good. And of course, it's an 18-month trigger.
That's correct, yes, because we had some cases and LDO helped with some clarification. And I can send that to anyone who's interested to see what that language looks like.
Very good. Also, might be interesting to note that County Commissioner was very complimentary of our short-term vacation rental policies yesterday. And I'll be glad, told him I would be glad to share that along to the Planning and Zoning Committee as well. And I see a big smile from.
Hard work yield.
Yeah, there you go. So told him I would be happy to pass that along today as well. Council, are there any other cases on our agenda this afternoon that you would like to hear? I do see your light, Councilman Henderson.
So that triggered something in memory about the UGC that we had discussed earlier, Karen, about the 500-foot distance from outside the urban overlay. You know, inside the urban overlay, we had sort of done away with the 500-foot restriction, but now that this is moving outside the 500-foot overlay, the old C2 has the 500-foot restriction. Correct. Where the UGC doesn't, and I thought we were going to somehow come up with maybe an amendment or something to address a UGC outside of the urban overlay that would address that.
I'm happy to give a brief answer, defer to Phil. We did discuss that, and we've had some discussion about the interaction between the alcohol, kind of the code requirements and zoning. And we've had some discussion with that with the consultants, Camiros, that are giving us guidance on the zoning code. So we've started the discussion. I would defer to Phil if he wants to give an update, but I think we do need to have a little bit more talk about what that looks like and where responsibility lies.
And the code section is in the beer code, actually,
Yeah.
and it's not in chapter 38, but 5-75 would have to be looked at in connection with the 500-foot restriction.
Okay.
Yes.
But that is something that we need to
Yes.
address.
Yeah, y'all tell us where you want to go.
Okay.
Any other comments further on that? Councilman Henderson?
No,
Good?
that's-
All right, thank you for bringing that up. Appreciate it. Council, I'll go back to asking you if there are any other cases that you need to discuss this afternoon. I am seeing none. Madam Chair, is there any further business that needs to come before Planning and Zoning? Councilwoman Coonrod,
I got a question. Thank you, Chair.
Yes, ma'am.
There's an area that I split with District 5 called Greenwood Terrace Apartments, or a lot of people refer to it as D Drive. It's more so not a question for you, Ms. Karen, but I need to know who would I need to speak to in regards to dumpsters being placed in front of the residents' homes? Like, is that strictly CHA, or is it the city doing with these dumpsters being placed there?
I'm not able to answer, but I'm.
Yeah, I knew it wasn't a question for you, but I wanted to know.
I'll try to follow up.
Mr. Taylor, welcome to Planning and Zoning. All right.
So if they're on private property or on CHA property?
It's a housing development, so the housing authority, but I guess the city control the streets, I guess.
So we own the dumpsters. I'm not sure exactly how we pick placement, but I'll be glad to get with you and we'll figure out where the dumpsters are and if there's a better spot for them.
Okay, thank you.
You bet.
Thank you,
You good,
Chair.
Councilwoman?
Yep.
Fantastic. Council, any other further business, Madam Chair?